Welcome to Pick Me Up, I'm Scared, the podcast.
I'm your host, Madeline.
And I'm your co-host, Kenna.
So Kenna, how was your birthday month off?
Woo! Woohoo!
Did you do anything exciting?
Oh my god, I went to Colorado to visit my parents. I went to a water park.
So fun.
I went to Disneyland. I had a rager at my house.
Yeah, your party was fun.
Yeah, and I went to Little Tokyo. So it was really fun.
Yeah, that sounds super fun.
How was your birthday?
Mine was pretty good. I did a road trip. I'm trying to see all the states. I've seen 40 states out of 50. So I did a road trip from Nashville, Tennessee up through Kentucky, Indiana to Detroit, Michigan, and then back down through Ohio.
Wow.
And it was really fun. And I have like two friends from Fresno who moved to Nashville. So they've been trying to get me to come out for like a decade. So that was exciting to see them and really nice. Yeah, it was super, super fun. And then we also did a trip for my boyfriend's birthday, which is July 27th. And yes, we're both Leos. If you are an astrology person, I know, shocking.
Yes.
So for his birthday, we went up like through California driving north, and he has an off-road car, so we went kind of up through like Lone Pine, up along the east side of the mountain range that becomes like Yosemite, and I'd never been to that part of California before, so it was super fun and silly, and we stayed in this like dirty little weird motel, and it was fun.
Very nice.
Yeah, I have to say the vegan food options in rural California are getting better and better.
Yeah, it's when I was vegan, oh my gosh, many years ago, because I was vegan from 12 years, from 16 to do the math.
Right.
There was not, it was actually funny though, when I go to my small hometown, there are a lot of vegan options.
Yeah, I feel like it's getting so much better. Like they had like vegan cream cheese at this like weird little sandwich shop we went to. So obviously we had the month off, right? But we did still post our 2 bonus episodes on our Patreon.
Yes, on dating tips. Ooh.
Yeah, because everybody likes our sexy episodes. We did that episode, Sex in the Capitalist City, and everyone loves that episode.
Yes.
And every time we talk about like romance or dating, like we did one, All of Our Grandpas Are Creeps, that was all about straight men's attraction to minors. People loved that. So Kenna and I did bonus content episodes. Each one of us did our own episode about our dating tips.
Yeah, and I included all my tips in my own personal handwriting, which everyone wants to see.
Yeah, everyone's obsessed with Kenna's handwriting. It is very good handwriting. So that was all up there. And if you're not subscribed to our Patreon yet, it's patreon.com/pickmeupimscared, and it is $3 a month, and we post 2 bonus episodes, monthly audio episodes, and there is an RSS feed where you can just like add that to your Apple Podcast or whatever, and it's super easy to listen to.
Yes.
Yeah, so the only other thing I have in our little introductory stuff to talk about is the book pre-order, which is still going on. I had like a meeting with the publishers, and they were like, your book pre-order's going really well, and I was like very excited to hear that. So if you haven't pre-ordered the book yet, the book is called I Survived Capitalism, and all I got was this lousy t-shirt, and you can pre-order it at all of the great big mega evil bookstores. I don't choose them, they choose us. So Barnes & Noble is doing a pre-order, and they in particular are really excited about how many pre-orders they've gotten for it.
Oh, that's cool.
So they could potentially be open to hosting some sort of event or collaboration if enough people pre-order from them. So I would say maybe I'm slightly skewed to that, but also Powell's is doing a pre-order, which I know they do union busting. Ugh. And Amazon, who I call the Great Satan, is doing a pre-order. So your options are limited, but there are some there, and you can also request it through your local library, and there is an audiobook, which we now know will be read by me, that you can get to.
Yeah, I missed out on that one.
I know, it could have been so good.
No, it would not have been good.
Also,
I just do it in my impression of you the entire time.
You're like, oh my God. Why is food so expensive? I hate it here. That's me. That's my impression of me. Yeah, so also to help promote it, my book people authorized me to release some cut content on our Patreon. So I did post my 2-week meal plan that comes in at $75 for 2 weeks worth of food. And it has all the recipes and the price per serving and the ingredients and all of that on there. So that's on our Patreon too if you want to check it out.
Yeah, there's some good stuff over there.
There's some good stuff. Okay, anyway, so that's out of the way. Someone said that 2 people have said we chit-chat too much at the beginning of our episodes, and we should just get into the content.
Okay.
So we're going to mainline the content.
Speed run.
Speed run the chit-chat and get to the good stuff. And the good stuff today, in honor of Labor Day, I have a special labor question for you, Kenna, because this will be released on Labor Day.
Shoot.
Have you ever been fired or laid off?
No.
Never.
No.
That's pretty good.
I have laid myself off. I have quit.
Right. No, it's a little different.
But also, I've never been dumped either.
Wow. You're really going strong.
I know, I'm like the most obnoxious person. I've never been fired and I've never been dumped. But I think it is because I can read the room and be like, this is not going to end well.
So you're just like getting out while the getting's good.
Kind of, yes.
Okay, that makes sense.
But I've never done anything at a job that I would consider a fireable offense. Like, I'm a very good employee.
You are a very good worker.
Not to toot my own horn, but like...
Also, though, I respect people who are very bad workers, too. I think it's resistance.
Oh, for sure.
But you are a great worker.
But here's the thing, though. Being a great worker will not prevent people in your office from fucking hating you, including your bosses.
So true.
Like, I could be making a company so much fucking money, but something about my attitude, my affect, the way that I question things would make them want to fire me. And I'm like, I just made you a shit ton of money.
Right. No, that's totally true. I have been laid off once. My whole department was cut, but I was the only person in the department. So they were like, we're cutting the marketing department. And I was like, I'm the marketing department. And they were like, yes, correct.
Oh, jeez.
And then rumor has it, one of my ex-coworkers told me later that that the boss bragged that he wanted to buy a really new expensive car. So that's why he cut the marketing so that he could buy a really fancy car. So that was cool. I talk about that in my book, actually. I do the whole story. And the legal team at the book place were like, this guy might sue you. We got to make this real vague. So I made it real vague. But yeah, it was really, really fucking scary, basically. I got fired on a Friday, which is what you're supposed to do that so that the employees have the weekend to feel normal and they don't show up with a gun and shoot the place up, basically.
Ooh.
Yeah. This is a technique that was developed after there was a series of workplace shootings in the 90s. Do you remember that?
Yeah, that's where the phrase going postal comes from.
Right, exactly. So that was a prominent part of our youth, and then people were like, well, if you fire somebody on a Friday, then the weekend just feels normal.
I mean, it could.
Yeah, well, and then somebody came out with a contrasting opinion. They were like, no, you should fire somebody on a Monday, so then they have all week to look for a job or something like that. But whatever, I got fired on a Friday. It was the Friday school of camp at the place that I worked. And yeah, it was really, really stressful. I was not expecting it. So, well, I mean, I was kind of expecting it, but like I'd been expecting it for 2 years because I knew the guy who owned the company I worked at was pretty unhinged and just really selfish and cruel and not very smart at business. So I knew it was unstable, but the moment that it happened, I wasn't anticipating it in that moment. And I was not financially equipped for it. It was very, very, very scary. But thankfully, I had another job by Monday.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah. So very, very scary, though. And I thought that this would be a good episode for Labor Day, because Labor Day obviously stems from, like, the Haymarket uprisings, and a lot of labor activists and, you know, famous communists and socialists and anarchists fighting against the evils of capitalism and their bosses exploiting them. And Labor Day is the holiday that was like the hard-won holiday to celebrate the workers stemming back from those movements, which also, though famously and more practically, you know, those movements gave us the 5-day work week instead of working like over 100 hours a week, and they gave us workplace protections, safety measures, all sorts of really, really good things. And the ultimate irony of Labor Day to me is that now office workers, we all get Labor Day off, but service workers don't.
Yeah, that sucks.
I know.
I mean, I have definitely worked a Labor Day. The only good thing about it is you get either paid time and a half or double time.
Right. And that's an interesting thing about how things work in the United States. We don't really have paid holidays off because your boss can make you work a holiday, but you are entitled to holiday pay.
Yeah.
which is a little better, I guess. But yeah, I always feel like an asshole going into businesses on Labor Day when I'm off, and I'm like, hee hee, I want a coffee, and then it's like, oh, I have the day off. You have to be here.
I feel like that at Starbucks.
Yeah.
Like on Thanksgiving, I'm like, oh.
Right.
Like you run in, you're like, I gotta grab whipped cream that I'm supposed to take, and then you're like, I'm gonna get a coffee, and you're like, fuck, everybody has to be here.
Right. Right. It's super fucked up. But I thought in honor of Labor Day, the specific labor-related topic we would do is at-will employment.
Ah.
Interesting, right?
Little twist.
Yeah, I always think about at-will employment because I didn't realize it wasn't the norm until, I was like in my 20s. I thought everywhere in the world just had at-will employment.
It never even occurred to me until I think like TikTok.
Yeah.
Or just like, you hear vaguely about other countries, like when you're younger, like, oh, like, well, in other, like in Germany, like everybody has like a formal, like if you work at an automaker there, it's formalized union and they can't just fire you and blah, blah, blah.
Or you get a contract from your employer.
But when you're just starting out a job, that seems so it seems like a fantasy land where you're just like, well, that doesn't apply to me. Why should I even know that?
Right, exactly. And that's kind of what it's like being a worker in the United States. Everywhere else in the world gets these great protections that we're constantly told are literally impossible, or it doesn't even occur to us to ask for, but everywhere else has them in their standard. And at-will employment is a good example of something we're stuck with that a lot of other people don't have to deal with in the world. So, what at-will employment is.
It's basically the ability to be fired at any time for any reason.
Exactly. Yeah, it typically means that an employer can fire an employee for any reason that's legal, right?
There are some because my mom has done HR, so non-discriminatory reasons.
Yes, you can be fired for non-discriminatory reasons.
A lot of people get fired for discriminatory reasons, and then they're just like, we're at will employment.
Yeah, and they just make something up.
You can make up anything to fire someone.
You can just say anything. Yeah.
You can just be like, they're weird, and they're like, okay.
Yeah, or you can be like, I don't think they dress professionally, or like, they're not the right fit for the vibe, or like, I just wasn't working out. Yeah. So you can just fire an employee for any legal non-discriminatory reason without warning, and you don't have to disclose why you're doing it. You don't have to have just cause for letting them go. You don't have to have any severance pay. You don't have to give them anything. You can literally be like, hey, you're fired, leave the building now, and that's the end of the relationship.
Yeah, I feel like the only law there, I don't remember if it varies from state to state, where you get your final paycheck.
Yeah, there are laws about when you get your final paycheck. Yes.
Some places it's like 24 hours, and other places I think it's like a week or something.
Exactly. Yes. The other thing that comes along with this, though, is it means that employees can quit their job without notice. So it also means you can just walk in and be like, I hate this place, fuck you, I'm out, and there's no legal recourse.
Yeah, that's cool.
That part's cool, for sure. But the opposite of this, obviously, would mean as a worker, you would get certain protections that mean your boss couldn't just fire you because they feel like it. And that is actually what's standard most places in the world. You're super protected as a worker from your boss just being in a bad mood. But in the United States, all but one state is an at-will state, meaning we don't have those protections. And yes, you could get fired at any time for any reason, including that your boss just does not like your vibe. But Kenna, can you guess which one state in the United States is not at-will, where you do have certain protections?
Vermont?
No. Shockingly, it is Montana.
Oh, because there's nobody there.
Yeah, there's like 12 people there. And one of them is my grandma, and she moved there from California, and now likes to complain about the Californians moving out there.
I feel like, to me, like, I just forget about this is so fucked up. Montana's just an extension of Colorado, because the Rockies.
Wow, wait, is Montana above Colorado?
Yeah.
Okay,
well, because I will say Montana, so beautiful. Underrated.
Yeah, Montana's gorgeous.
How beautiful it is. And it just, to me, it gives very Colorado vibes, so I always just think of it like...
Colorado Part 2.
Yeah, because I had a lot of friends who would, like, growing up, who, like, lived in Montana for a time. I feel like for some reason there's a weird Montana to Colorado pipeline.
Interesting. Well, yeah, so in the United States, we have mostly at-will employment, but Montana has a different rule. They have this thing that's called the Wrongful Discharge from Employment Act, which means that, there's a probationary period where an employee first starts a job and you can kind of suss out how they're doing. But if they make it past that probationary period, the employer has to have a good cause for termination that's like documented. So think like you've been told multiple times you're late to work, it's documented, and now you're late to work again, so this is just cause for letting you go, something like that. And if you feel like you were not fairly terminated, like you were fired for no good reason, then you go through the court system and you file a case and you try to sue your previous employer, and there's legal precedent for that in the state of Montana. So the closest thing we have to that in other states in the United States would be wrongful termination cases.
Yeah.
Yeah, but again, those, even though they apply in at-will states, they have to be something so extreme and something really illegal that's usually related to retaliation or discrimination.
Yeah, to me it's either racial, sexual discrimination, or whistleblower.
Yes, it's totally stuff like this. It's like if you were fired and there was sexual harassment happening in the workplace, or race discrimination for being pregnant. If you think you were fired for your age, like you were getting too old and they wanted to fire you and hire someone younger. If you were fired because you feel like your boss was retaliating against you for filing a workers' compensation claim. If you had a wage and hour dispute, like your boss wasn't paying you correctly and you brought it up and they fired you. Whistleblower retaliation. Violations of the Family and Medical Leave Act, which that's the act that applies to the entire United States that protects you from leaving work when you're ill, when you need to take care of a loved one who is ill, or if you're caring for or bonding with a newborn baby. So a lot of people don't know that they have this right, but employees do have the right to return to their job free from retaliation for taking leave because of a family or medical issue of that kind. And it only applies if your workplace has 50 or more employees for at least 20 weeks a year. But if your workplace is like that, you are eligible for this FMLA leave if you've worked at the job for at least 1 year and put in at least 1,250 hours. And if that sounds like you, then you can receive up to 12 weeks of unpaid leave for any of those reasons: for the birth and care of a newborn child, for the care of an adopted or foster child, for caring for a family member who is suffering from a serious medical condition, or if you yourself are suffering from a medical condition that prevents you from doing your job, or also if you're like caring for a member of the armed forces who's under medical care for a serious illness. But a lot of people I don't even think know they have this right, because it's so hard to enforce, and somebody will just fire you and make up a different reason. Because like, who really thinks they can leave their job for 12 weeks and come back and still be offered their job? And it's not even a really great law, right? Because you're not paid for it. But it is better than most people know we have.
Literally the only people I've known who've taken this, it's literally maternity leave, or they have cancer.
Right, exactly.
Like they literally, or like they're literally like, or their spouse is literally like has cancer.
Yeah, somebody is in a really extreme medical position.
But to me, it shouldn't have to be that extreme.
No. And I mean, I don't think it has to be that extreme to be protected by the law. But the issue with an at-will state is that you could say you're like, I'm sick and I need to take 2 weeks off of work. Okay? You've worked at the company that has over 50 employees for over a year. You've put in at least 1,250 hours. And you know you're eligible for this protection federally. You're not going to get paid for it, right? Because the United States is not great. But you know at least you can take this time off legally and still return to your job. Well, there's nothing to stop your boss from being like, actually, we fired you while you were gone because we just don't like your vibe.
Yeah.
And how are you going to prove that? You're going to be like, I feel like you fired me because I took this thing I'm entitled to, this Family and Medical Leave Act. But then it would be on you to prove it. And it's so easy for them to just be like, no, that had nothing to do with it. We literally just hate you.
Yeah. Or like, to me, it's like, it's one of those things too, where it's like, there's so many things people can file lawsuits for and probably would have a good case, but you have to put up possibly tens of thousands of dollars.
And you have to know you're going to win. You have to have the time and energy to go through with it. I mean, I will say I do have a friend. We know somebody who had a really shitty work environment and sued them for two different things, for wrongful termination and also for racial discrimination, and won both of those. And the lawyer she used was a lawyer who only took money if you won the case. And for both of them, her former employer settled, and she got a good amount of money. At least she was out of work for like a year when this happened. So she did get a year's worth of salary that she should have been entitled to. So I will say, if you're experiencing something like this, if you can find a lawyer who doesn't get paid unless you do, it's worth pursuing.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of us feel like we could never win a case like that. And even when she told me I'm suing these people, I was like, yeah, good for you. But in my head, I did not think it would actually turn out in her favor, because why would anything good happen? But it did, because for the company...
I forgot about that. But, like, I think most people... Like, for me, I'd be like, I'm not going to file a suit. Like, I just don't have, like, the energy.
That's how I would feel, too. I'd be like, nope, just move on, move upward. But if you are in that position, I will say that experience changed my outlook on it. And I was like, fuck yeah, maybe do sue for all these things. What's the worst that's going to happen? They're going to say no, and you're in the same position you were in before.
Yeah, I saw some stand-up comedian on TikTok being like, I want to be a professional grudge holder. Yeah. And I was like, this would be a great job if you were like, I hold a grudge.
Yeah, if
you
you're
can
like,
do it
I'm
for
not
good.
gonna let it go. Yeah, these people are evil. Yeah. So, you know, this kind of FMLA leave, it is the one protection we have, but it is wild that we don't have paid time off for this stuff, like mandated at a federal level, because that's what every other country has. But I do feel like a lot of people don't even know that we do have this one little protection. You know, in other countries, they have legally mandated paid time off for workers for multiple reasons. The United States is the only industrialized country that doesn't, and one of the only countries in the world that doesn't. And this guy, Don Dowling Jr., who talks about labor kind of standards around the world, was talking about this and is like, yeah, by European standards and even Latin American and African and Asian standards, the Family and Medical Leave Act is stingy because it doesn't give any paid leave. The people who go off on maternity leave or on FMLA leave, that's what it's abbreviated to, don't have a legal right to get paid. All we're doing is holding open their job. And by European standards, that's laughable.
Yeah, my friend had a baby and she lives in Japan. And I was like, oh, when are you going back to work? And she was like, oh, I have maternity leave for like 2 years. And I was like, how can you afford that? And she gave me the strangest look. She's like, what? She's like, I get paid.
Yeah.
And I was like, I was just like, in my mind, I was like, what? Like, she just saw how we both were confused at each other.
Yeah.
We both were like, wait, what?
Yeah, no, every other country in the world, you get paid time off for vacation legally mandated, for sick leave legally mandated, for maternity leave, many countries for paternity leave. You know, some countries, like Cuba, even does it for, like, grandparents when a baby is born.
Yeah, and I think that, like, for some reason, in American society, like, Japanese society is portrayed as, like, they work longer hours, they do harder work than us, but they don't. They get more paid time off. Like,
yeah, everybody in the world gets more paid time off than the United States because we have zero hours of legally mandated paid time off.
Yeah, because in my mind, I thought Japan, I felt, you know, I felt really stupid after being like, I'm like, oh, we must have the same because, like, the way it's portrayed in the media, Japan and us have the same laws. No, not at all. All my friends who are Japanese are like, what? We get paid healthcare? What are you talking about?
Yeah. Also, paid holidays. So that's another thing that people don't take into account when they're calculating paid time off by country. And for China, for example, this is something that's really prevalent when you, like, we work with people in China all the time. And in China, they get paid sick leave, paid maternity leave, paid vacation time. But on top of that, they also get federal holidays paid time off. And like we talked about earlier, in the United States, you don't get them off. You don't get paid time off, and your boss can make you work. And if you are forced to work, the only thing you get is like time and a half or whatever, or sometimes double time. So your wages will be higher, but yeah, you still have to work it. And if you don't work it, you don't get that as paid time off, like legally mandated by the United States. But in other countries, their federal holidays often are legally mandated paid time off. And that's why, for example, famously, if you've ever worked in China, in the first quarter, everything shuts down for weeks, like a month. Like a month, everybody is gone because the whole, like, month is Chinese New Year, and it's considered like a federal holiday. So people get it paid time off. And that does not count towards their vacation time or towards their sick time or towards like maternity leave, anything like that. It's totally separate. So yeah, in the United States, we have really, really, really bad employee protections. So this thing we have, the wrongful termination cases, if you're fired, this is the only way you could potentially have legal recourse for being fired if you can prove that you are actually fired for one of these things. But most of them would have to be very shocking displays of bigotry or like straight up retaliation for an employee calling their boss out on something. And you would need evidence of that usually in writing. It would be very, very hard to prove, basically. Because employers can often get around discrimination claims by just saying they fired you for a completely different reason. Like, oh, you never said hello to me in a nice enough voice when I came in the office. That's why I fired you.
Yeah, and I think a lot of, like, especially, like, discrimination can be like, oh, well, you didn't wear your hair in a professional manner.
Right, exactly.
And it's like, well, how am I supposed to wear my hair? Mm-hmm. Like, you can't exist as, like, a person of color.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, and this is, like, something that I think a lot of people think is outdated, but a few years ago, I had somebody I knew, an acquaintance who worked at, I can't say the name of the retail store because if it's not accurate, then it's potential liability legally, but at a popular chain retail store, and they were black, and they wore their hair in braids, and they were told that braids were not a professional style, and this was maybe 2018.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so you wouldn't expect this kind of thing to still happen, but obviously it does still happen because the legacy of white supremacy is like so massive in the United States.
Yeah,
and people have to deal with this all the time.
That's what I was thinking. Mm-hmm. And like, yeah, it's just like, but like that's how companies will try to legally maneuver.
Right. So they'll use vague terms like this, or again, they'll just make up a totally different reason, and that is okay because we have at-will employment. So the exception to this in the United States, where you do actually have protection, is if you're in a union, like you were talking about. So if you're in a union, right, a union's an organized group of workers who uses collective strength, right, to have some bargaining power regarding things like wages, hours, benefits, workplace safety, job training, whatever work-related issues you run into. And usually unions have employment contracts with the employers on behalf of their members, which means you're not an at-will employee, you are a contract employee, and suddenly you have a lot more protection because your boss can't just fire you for no reason. So if there's any changes to the terms or conditions of the contract, those things have to be negotiated, and the members of the union or like their elected representatives within the union are able to vote for or against those proposed changes. So when you have a union, the benefits you get, the work conditions you get, the terms of your employment cannot just be changed at the whim of upper management, right? But in a non-union workplace, they can. So this system makes it more likely that an employer is going to avoid any actions that they can't justify to their employees, like implementing unsafe equipment or extending work hours without proper compensation to go along with it, because they know it's not just one employee they can do something unfair to who will take it and walk away. It's like, well, now you've affected your entire staff and you are going to run into massive productivity issues. You could have a potential strike coming. This could really disrupt your workflow. So there is more protection, and you do usually, but not always, have an employment contract if you're a union employee. And of course, the United States law protects the right of any worker to join or form a union, to improve the condition of their work, to ensure fairness, to ensure respect, safety in the workplace. But a lot of these companies will try to tell you unions are not desirable to be a part of, right? Or they'll try to tell you unions have done nothing. But my favorite bumper sticker I ever saw was like, if you love your weekend, thank a union. Mm-hmm. Because unions have historically been the only driving force for creating more workers' rights in the United States. So a lot of this is really anti-union propaganda by people who own businesses, who are the only people who do not serve to benefit from increased union membership. And the reality is that on average, union members earn better wages, have better benefits than workers in similar jobs who are not represented by a union. And yeah, one of those benefits is that employees are typically protected by a collective bargaining agreement, which ensures they can only be fired with just cause.
Yes.
Yeah, just like in Montana, right? The only U.S. state where it's not at will.
Yeah, and I think most people think of, like, popular ones, teachers, firefighters.
Right. And the only union that we don't like is the cop union, because cops aren't workers.
Yeah.
They're arms of the state.
Yeah.
They shouldn't get a union.
I mean, the actors, big one.
Yeah, a
SAG,
positive one, yeah.
NFL, professional athletes have unions. Those are probably the ones that most people are like iron workers, but like My guess is like
Teamsters.
Teamsters.
My dad's union. My
Yeah.
dad's in the stagehand union.
Yes, like, oh yeah, I have a friend in this. I have two friends, I think, in the stagehand union. Mostly, or like here, you hear of a lot of people who are like in SAG after.
Yeah.
After.
Yes. Mm-hmm. SAG after. Yeah.
And you know, to me, if I wasn't at the job I'd at, my goal would be becoming like a union wardrobe person.
Right. Yeah. A union job. You know, I think like when you know people who work union jobs, you have a different perception of it than if you don't. And the reality is like job security has always been a huge part of being union, because unions do, yes, typically work with employers to preserve people's jobs, especially during hard times when lots of people go through layoffs, which we actually saw happen when the COVID-19 shutdowns happened with the economy. That actually became a thing. And yeah, that's because before an employee can actually be fired, you have to go through this grievance process usually, or even like arbitration with your employer. But despite all this, in 2018, union membership reached a new low. That year, just around 10% of all American workers were union members.
Wow.
Yeah, and compared to 1983, for example, 20% of American workers were union.
Wow.
So it's dropped basically in, one generation. I mean, I was born in 1986, you were born in 1985. So in our lifetime, we've seen union membership cut in half. And before that, union membership was even higher. And during that kind of peak lockdown era of the pandemic in 2020, what evidence showed is that union workers were more likely to keep their jobs and get paid during lockdown. And the number of workers represented by a union, the way we know this, declined in 2020, but the unionization rate rose. And that's because union workers were less likely to lose their jobs. So out of all the pool of workers, the ones who got cut were non-union, which meant that the 2020 figures for how many people were in a union were higher because everyone else lost their jobs.
Oh.
Right. So that's how we know union workers were more likely to keep their job than non-union workers. So union rates have slowly been increasing since 2018, and I think we've all seen that. We've seen, you know, the Amazon unionization efforts, the Starbucks unionization efforts, really, really inspiring and amazing, but they are still so far below what the rates were in the 70s and 80s. And yeah, that means that the overwhelming majority of American workers lack this protection and still are subjected to at-will employment, meaning they can be fired on a whim by their boss for no reason at all, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're wondering, do bosses fire people for no reason at all? Yes, they do.
Like, in unison.
Yes, overwhelmingly, yes. I mean, I'm pretty sure I was fired so that guy could buy a new car. And I'm a good worker. I'm a good employee. I know I'm a good employee.
I feel like I was close to being fired one time, straight up because the owner just didn't like me.
Yes. I mean, another thing that, God, I don't even know how much of this I can talk about. But the other thing at my workplace is that when this was all happening, I was young and I had long blonde hair and I looked like a Barbie. And everybody at the company was like, you cannot be around the owner of the business because he had tendency to sexually harass everybody. And everyone was like, yeah, you'll sue. And like, we all know that, and you should sue if that happens. But to him, I was an obstacle, right? So a lot of reasons. But there's this guy who's the CEO of a 60-person consulting firm in Ohio, and he was describing his firing practice really casually in an article. And he's just like, yeah, I fired people from my company for cause, but I've also just fired people who I didn't think got what we were about. And frankly, I don't lose a minute of sleep when I fire someone who I think isn't working out for whatever reason. So literally your boss can just be like, I don't think you get my vibe and I'm going to fire you and I'm not even going to think about it in 10 seconds.
Okay, here's the thing. In America, if someone doesn't have a job, that can be like a death sentence. I'm not fucking joking. Like,
no, you're not. And we'll get into it, but you're correct.
Like, if you have a chronic, you get your insurance through your work. Like, we don't have like public assistance. Like, shit, people do not realize how close anybody is to a catastrophe. And most people, like, I hope don't have to go through it. Most people don't realize that until shit hits the fan. Like, until something,
really true.
Until you get sick, until you get older, until an accident happens.
Or until you lose your job and you weren't expecting it.
Yeah, or someone, like, I just think about how so many people have literally been like, yeah, my life was ruined because I was just in a partnership with someone who took all my money. Wasn't their fault.
Yeah. No, and there's no recourse. And the most infuriating part about this to me is that, like, your boss who can fire you and ruin your life in a second, there's a really good chance that they're not even good at their job.
No, we talked about this on the CEO episode where we're just like, what? Like, when the CEOs were like, what are they doing most of the day? They're being like, what's up, Chad? What's up, Mike?
Yeah.
What's up, I'm trying to think of another bro name, tech bro name.
You already said Chad.
Chad.
Sean. Sean's a good one. Tyler. I get the Tylers are bro, like CEO bros now.
What's up, Tyler?
I think they've aged into it. Yeah.
But like, or like, what's up, Tim?
Yeah, Tim's a good one.
I mean, that is the CEO of Apple.
Oh, right. Yeah. I just know that I think Tim is like not my favorite name because one time I lived with a professional snowboarder named Tim. And he was the worst dude. Okay, so he was so bad. When I first met him, I saved his name in my phone as first name Tim, last name sucks, but I was moving into his house, so I was just like, whatever. He was so awful. Somebody moved out, and the way he chose who would move in is he just chose the hottest girl with the biggest tits. Not a lie. He was very proud of this. He told us this. He was like, yeah, I'm just going to choose like the hottest girl who applies who has the biggest tits.
Oh my God.
And we were like, of course you are, Tim. And so the girl who moved in, her name was Becca. And Becca would just blast EDM like until 5 a.m. in her bedroom. And she lived above me. It was a 2-story house. So we shared a wall. So my wall would just be vibrating with EDM until 5 a.m. And I started my work shift at 5 a.m.
Oh, God.
Yeah, so it was just the worst living situation ever. And when Tim was home, not snowboarding, all he would watch on TV would be Anchorman, and he would hit the repeat button. So Anchorman just played on loop all day, every single day. So I have most of Anchorman, the movie, memorized from this experience. It was so bad.
Cursed.
And he'd just sit on the couch watching Anchorman smoking weed, like, oh, sick. Anyway.
Isn't it funny how, like, just someone with one name will ruin it for you forever? Someone will show you their brand new baby. This is little Timmy. And
I'm like, no.
Fuck this kid.
This baby. No, yeah. No, it's true. The name, though, it's like a cursed name in my head from this guy, Tim. Okay, yeah. But we have data about how your boss just firing whoever they want on a whim is, like, probably not even good for the business. So this doesn't have to be the best interest of the company. And one of the things that people look into when they look into managers, like, yeah, there's like a class rage reason why you hate your manager, right? But also your manager's not the owner of your business. So like, why do we hate our managers so much? Well, I think we all just intrinsically know that most managers are incompetent. And the reason why most managers are incompetent is because they're usually not hired because they display good managerial skills. Usually they're people who were promoted or hired a level up because they were good at doing a different job, not management, at a company. So the best workers aren't always the best managers, and the best managers aren't always the best workers. And this is called the Peter Principle. So it states that firms promote competent workers until they become incompetent managers. So it's super interesting. So basically, let's say you have, for example, this is one of the people they did studies on different industries, but in one industry they studied, it was sales. So let's say you have high-performing sales workers, people who are really good salespeople. And let's say, this company has these salespeople who are really, really talented and keep getting higher and higher numbers. Those are the people who are more likely to be promoted through the company, right? Because they're performing the best at their job of sales.
Because I've always been best at sales and never got recognized.
Okay, well...
Do you like how I'm like, I have a bone to pick with this one? Because I actually oh my God. I make so much money at retail and then I never get...
You would be the statistical anomaly because most places, the people who are the best sales workers were more likely to get promoted. But what they found is that prior sales performance actually is a negative predictor of managerial performance.
Oh, I would totally believe that.
Yes, even after accounting for selection into the sample of promoted workers. So like in one study, researchers looked at salespeople and they found a strong positive relation between past sales performance and promotion to managerial positions. Just meaning the better your sales were in the past, the more likely you were asked to get promoted to a managerial position. They found this to be true. But they found that doubling sales credits increased the probability that a worker would be promoted by 14.3%. But once promoted, the pre-promotion sales performance would negatively predict manager added value because the equivalent relatively poor prior sales performance among newly promoted managers would be associated with significant improvements in subordinate performance. So it's like this paradox, basically. So two things are happening. The worst sellers are actually making better managers because that's not their skill set. They're not great at selling, but they're good at like managing people. And the best sellers are making worse managers because they were just way better at selling things.
Yeah, and you know, just like from my personal experience, I could believe this because some people who are really good at sales are like pushy. So like, and I don't like a pushy boss.
Well, a pushy boss isn't effective. And what else was happening is that when you remove the good salesperson from sales and you put them in a managerial position, yeah, your numbers go down. So you lost your best salesperson, so all your numbers are down. So then the managerial performance of that person, now they have to be an even better manager because they have to make up for their own loss of themselves. And odds are they're not even a good manager. So how are they going to be a great manager? So you kind of are like messing yourself up double by promoting people who are good at one job and hiring them to instead do a totally different job that requires a different skill set, like management. So, you know, we have then these bosses, these managers, who are actually completely incompetent when it comes to managerial skills. That's not what they're good at. And those are the incompetent managers that might be firing you for any reason they see fit in any moment, even to the company's detriment. So Eric Fudali, who's the partner and managing attorney of this civil rights firm called the Bloom Firm, says you could get fired because the boss is having a bad day, because he's in a bad mood, because you didn't laugh at his joke. And this is kind of the trait of a bad manager who's just like, I don't know how to manage her. I was hot shit sales guy, for example. Now I'm promoted because I'm the best. So I must be super good at managing too. And it's just like, I don't like you. Gone bye-bye. And it's like, well, not only is that bad for the person getting fired, obviously, but it's also like not even good if you're doing capitalism. If you're like trying to be a capitalist, this is just like not an efficient or smart system.
I know, it is funny because I feel like some of the best people I know, like literally at doing business, are like anti-capitalist. It's wild.
Well, that's true, because I think that the people who understand capitalism the best are the people who hate it, because I think it's a system that's hard to look at and think it's fair the more you understand it. So the only people who like capitalism are people who, one, don't really understand it that much, or two, understand it and just have a bad value system because they're like, well, I'm going to be the one person who benefits. Mm-hmm. So maybe it's like a delusion of grandeur thing, or maybe so much privilege that they're right and they will be the one person who benefits.
But it's weird because I just see people who don't care about making money, they're just like, yeah, I'm just doing my thing, and they'll make a ton of money because they're just like, I just want to help I just want to run the company good, or blah, blah, blah. Like, I think about, like, fucking, like, Patagonia or something. I mean, I don't know them that well.
They had some sort of bad stuff come up recently.
Yeah. But, like, previously, it's just like, I'm just selling my gear. Mm-hmm. You know? It's just like, it is weird how people who are nice and have values just sometimes make a shit ton more money.
Yeah, I mean, I think about that with my partner who passed away, who ran Lip Service. Like, he really tried to run, like, a fair and equitable company. And he hated capitalism. And he told me his philosophy once, and I was like, this does not make sense. But he was like, I have to make as much money as possible because then I will distribute it to people around me. And if I don't make that money, some other guy's going to make it. He's not going to give it to other people. He's going to hoard it all for himself. So if I get a bigger share of the pie, I can distribute it more fairly. And I was like, okay, this is a super individualized approach to, like, the greater issue of capitalism. Yeah. Like, we need systemic overhaul. Like, we need socialism. Capitalism is not sustainable. But I get how he reached that point in his head, you know? So that's what drove him. He's like, no, we need to sell more, because the more money we make, the more I can take care of my people. And now that I'm in the position of the business, I think about the two. It's like the only benefit to growth is to hire more of my friends, to give everybody promotions, raises, pay increases, to help more people. And it does, like, capitalism drives you to be super individualistic, even in your thoughts about community care. You're like, well, the more I can get, the more I can help people.
That's, like, effective altruism.
Yes, which is fucked, you know? It's not ideal.
It kind of leads to some weird which I want to do a bonus episode on one time. But it's like, yeah, it's funny to me how, this is, like, again, anecdotally, how people I know who have run the most, like, as logical as a business you can run, like, we're not very interested in making money just so they could have a higher status or, like, be, like, a step above everyone else on the ladder, you know?
Right. So all of this stuff about how employment at will plays into this idea of, like, bad managers, that capitalism is, like, incentivized us to have bad managers. Liz Ryan wrote about this in a Forbes article and said, employment at will gives supervisors and managers the idea that they are kings and queens in their little kingdoms. The idea promotes loyalty to a supervisor over idea sharing, disruptive thinking, or any other ambitious undertaking. Employment at will squashes the potential of your team, your firm's greatest asset, if you can step out of the fear-based management to tap it. So I thought this was really interesting because she was like, this doesn't even make sense for you as a business owner because you were literally just telling people to shut up and serve and then like kiss your boss's ass no matter what the cost. And if you speak up or do anything disruptive or present any unique ideas, if you're not a yes man, you're so in danger of being fired that what happens is it stifles creativity and it stifles new ideas and turns the whole team just into yes man because they're so afraid of losing their job.
Yeah, I can think about this with, like, rich dudes all the time who have just, like, lost so much money because no one will be like, this is a bad fucking idea.
Oh, you mean Elon Musk? Changing Twitter to X and then making somebody I follow who's really funny, who's Goth DJ in Phoenix, awfully sinister, on Twitter was like, did he make the new, like, X icon logo for the app just have cum shots on it? And it totally looks like that. It's like he renamed it X to be edgy, and then it's all, like, grungy filter, and it just looks like Elon Musk jizzed all over the fucking thing.
I don't want to think about that.
It's so gross. But it's, like, a bad idea, clearly, to do this. And everybody around him is just like, that's a great idea, Elon. That's so good. Because he fires anyone who's not a yes man.
I know. This brings us back to the dating episode where... that's just one person I don't want to ever imagine doing it.
No, we don't have to. We don't.
He has a pair of jorts on underneath his pants and they never come off.
He's a never nude in our minds.
So that's another reason why I should subscribe to the Patreon.
Yeah, because we talk about how we don't want to think about evil people
fornicating.
We don't talk about that. We don't think about that. They never get to
Everyone
fornicate.
else, cool.
Yeah, evil people, no. Okay, so, this is the dystopia of the United States we're living in, right? You got some idiot boss who doesn't even understand how to run a company, and he doesn't like you, and he's going to fire you because he doesn't like your shoes or something like that, and you're just supposed to be like, okay, great, love it. Meanwhile, in the rest of the world, it's a lot harder to get fired, even for people who are not in a union. So there's this woman named Mindy Mayo, which is just like a really unfortunate name.
I'm sorry, it just sounds like it's in the Brady Bunch.
It sounds like a cartoon name.
We're sorry, Mindy.
Yeah, it's like Patty Mayonnaise. It's Mindy Mayo. But she has a great article where she talks about global payroll. And she says, contrary to international standards, at-will employment is a foreign concept in most other countries, while it is the norm in the United States. In many foreign jurisdictions, there is an assumption that once you have an employee, they are your partner for life. It is presumed they will keep their job indefinitely. At-will employment, recognized in the United States, is the exception and not the rule around the world. And that guy, Don Doling Jr., we talked about earlier, he agrees. He's like, the world's employment law regimes really divide into two parts. There's employment at will, which is only the United States, and then there's everybody else. So if you're thinking, how screwed over are Americans in the workforce by this at will employment thing, yeah, it's pretty bad, and it's mostly just us.
Yeah, it's like people wonder why if you go online, it seems like everybody has such a doom and gloom mindset, and it's like, it's because of our workplace.
Yeah.
Where do you think we spend the majority of our fucking time?
And our lack of labor protections is really terrifying here. And I think other people in other countries are always shocked when they learn how little protections we have. Like, I see people online from other countries, like, just learning that Americans don't get any paid vacation time legally mandated, and they're shocked and horrified, and we're like, wait till we tell you about our healthcare system.
I never had paid vacation until this job.
Yeah, me neither.
I literally would just be like, if I had to take, like, when I take time off, like, every year I have to go see my parents for Christmas, or I think they will, like, keel over. Mm-hmm. Like, they will just be like, you're not making it to Christmas. So every year I took a week off for, or like a couple days off for Christmas, and I'd always have to plan ahead because I never got paid.
Yeah, I think in California we have a rule about, like, general time off you accrue, but you have to use it for everything, for being sick, for paid, for vacation, for whatever, and it's really, really minimal. So for every, like, X hours you work, you get, like, 1 hour of paid time off in California. That's a state law, not a federal law. And I have used that before, but only for sick leave, and it wasn't very much. It was like you got, like, 2 days a year out of it or something.
I feel like, and the only times I've ever taken off were, like, I was so ill that there was no way I was coming into work. Like, I've come to work, like, Oh, so sick.
And
Oh
that's
my
why
God.
we have that culture that just like spreads infection in the United States too, because it just encourages people to come to work sick and get each other sick. The one time I remember really taking time off of work, so gnarly. I scratched my cornea with a hanger. Like I was putting a hanger up in my closet. It was a wire hanger. It slipped and it scratched my cornea, and I had to wear an eye patch that I got at the free clinic in San Francisco because I didn't have health insurance. So when I went to work, I was working as a graphic designer, freelance. And my depth perception was so off, I couldn't use the computer. Like, I wasn't used to it. And I remember being like, I can't do my job because I can't use the computer right because of my depth perception with this eye patch. And I had to take days off work while I like adjusted to wearing the eye patch. And I had to wait like 2 weeks before I could take the eye patch off. It was like a very intense thing. But yeah, that's the time really where I was like, I literally cannot do my job well, graphic design, because even if I figured out how to use the computer okay and make the mouse move where I want, it was so new to me and I was so not used to it that I wasn't able to image retouch well. And I was doing image retouching.
Oh.
Yeah. So whatever. This whole thing, the at-will employment thing, all of the labor standards in the United States, super, super bad. And this guy, Stephen Bruce, who's a PhD, explains, even if you get to the point, after going through all of the legal procedures, that you can fire an employee, and he's talking about everywhere but the United States for reference, you still have to pay severance pay or notice pay, which can be very expensive unless you have a really good cause. So in other countries, it's really hard to fire somebody. And then if you do manage to come up with a reason to fire them that makes sense and you've gone through everything and it's like above board, you got to pay them severance pay. Severance pay in the United States is virtually unheard of unless you're at a really high like level in a company.
Yeah, I think also in the United States, people use jobs that have thing like, oh, I get like paid time off for holidays, or I get like paid time off. They use it as a status symbol, and some people get really mad when people are like, well, everybody should have that. People are like, well, I worked my way up to this 6-figure job.
Oh, right. It's like one of those things that's like the same reason people get mad at the idea of forgiving student loan debt when they paid theirs off. They're like, I worked hard for this. And it's like, nobody should have to work hard for that. That should be a basic thing.
I would also say there's no way to actually calculate that. Like, it would be absurd to be like, why are we going to go through all the things in your life and make a spreadsheet on why you deserve it and why this other person doesn't?
Right, exactly.
Because maybe you got a loan from your parents. Maybe this other person did. Like, that, when people start doing that accounting, I'm like, okay, those in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. Let's see if you deserve this.
Yeah, that's totally a good point, because most often the people I know in my life, this is colloquial again, not research, but the people I know who have the cushiest jobs, the easiest life, a lot of them also have the most privileged upbringings. Mm-hmm. I have like 1 or 2 exceptions to this. People I know who have really good jobs now and they had hard upbringings, but for the most part, everybody else I've heard of, they came from like a really cush supportive lifestyle, you know, that they weren't working hard. They weren't getting the jobs at 14, you know, to support themselves. They weren't paying their own rent at 18, fresh out of the house. They weren't doing those things. So it's kind of the thing too, when you think about like who works the hardest, I'm like, it's a waitress doing the night shift. It's somebody who's on their feet all day. It's a construction worker working at 110 degrees out in the sun on a roof.
Telemarketers. Oh my God. I worked telemarketing for 1 week and could not hang.
Yeah, it's these people doing these really difficult jobs, either mentally or physically or some combination of both. And those are often the lowest paid jobs.
Yeah, like I think too, our culture especially, it's so funny that it did not occur to me, just maybe because I'm like a goth chick, is like hierarchy to people is extremely important. And to me, it's always been like, well, can you just get the job done?
Right. Yeah. The status or something is important to people. And I get it. Like, capitalism breeds that into you. It breeds this idea that you have to be the exception, that you're destined for greatness, right? It's individualism. It's American exceptionalism. It's all these things. But that's been drilled into people's heads from a very young age. And it's a very damaging kind of psychological position to take. And, you know, I think we see a lot of things we're going to talk about later about like the harms of this kind of thing, because our society does equate so much of your self-worth with like your profession or your job or your economic success, and tells you these very basic things like access to food and shelter and medical care are things you have to deserve by working hard enough or being good enough. It's like how damaging that is to us psychologically to get there.
I mean, I would say, like, again, like, how can you ever know who deserves what? Like, that's a huge moral quandary that our society has not yet to figure out. And also I had a thought, I'm like, wow, America overthrew kings and queens just so we all could be our own little individual kings and queens.
Yeah, I mean, the deserve thing's super interesting to me because that's a word I've always hated. I've always hated deserve because it's like, I don't deserve anything. There's no reason I have a house and somebody else doesn't. It's not like I deserved it and that person didn't. You know, it's just luck of the draw a lot of the times. It's the position you were born into. It's what medical ailment you encountered. All these series of unfortunate events that could happen that could throw your life off course at any time. And since I was a teenager, I always hated the word deserve.
Well, you know what? I remember listening to a podcast where they were talking about in modern society, modern Western, you know, like Greek, Roman, like from then on, like a really...
Your enemy, the Romans.
Yeah, the ancient Romans ruined everything. The ancient
Romans, yeah.
No, but like a really important story, like that. This is a reason why it's lasted for over 2,000 years, whatever. Is the story of Oedipus, and I don't mean it in the story of like the Oedipal complex. It's because it's a story that is used to show that that fortune can just fuck up your life. That you can do everything right in your life. And I mean, I wouldn't say the Oedipus, but you can do everything right in your life and things can still go terribly wrong and it's not your fault. It's the wheel of fate.
Yeah.
And they were talking about how important this was to show, God, I don't know about this, but like they were talking about like showing all these like classic plays like that to like service members.
Whoa.
Which I was like, whoa, that's fucked up. But in another way, I was like, honestly, I get why this is an enduring story over so many years because like, it's so like things can just go so wrong.
Yeah.
And the thing is like I would say in modern American society, there's been this fundamentalist takeover where it's like, if something bad happens, it means that God works in mysterious ways.
Right. Yeah. It is almost biblical or Christian.
Where it's like, if something bad happens to someone, that's not their fault. Someone gets, run over by a bus that got dropped. You know, it's just like, you know, like a Final Destination type shit.
Right. Random
it's like,
stuff.
Just random stuff like got hit by a bolt of lightning. Well, they must have been doing something.
Right. Yeah. It's like there's two approaches. It's either like you deserved that somehow, or the alternative is that God doesn't put on you more than you can handle. It's a test. God has a plan. Everything, it happens for a reason. And you're like, what if the reason is just that life is hard and sometimes bad things happen to people, and because of that, the money I pay into a government, the purpose of a government is to support and care for me when bad things happen.
I would also say, what if that we are making all these decisions, and what if we are just creating unnecessary suffering because we chose to, and we could choose to just not create unnecessary suffering.
I mean, that's what it really is. That's the thing we see all the time. It's like...
Because it's mostly structural.
And this is all policy decision. It's policy decision to not care about people, to leave them out to dry, to have things like at-will employment where nobody cares about what happens to you after your boss says you're fired.
Because people are like, oh, well, that's just how nature works. No, it doesn't.
Mm-mm.
If you actually want to do the research, that is not how societies have functioned. That's not how people function. That's not how humans work.
Yeah, capitalism is 400 years old.
Yeah, like...
People are a lot older than that.
But I think this is what is taking place now. Like, this is... Like, there has been a conservative effort to make it seem that everything is just how it is and it can't be changed, and suffering is good because it makes you stronger, and that is bullshit.
Well, okay, going along with this.
Sorry, I'm going off on a tangent.
No, it's true. Going along with this, you know, I mentioned this earlier, the U.S. is only one of a handful of countries where employment is at will. According to the National Conference of State Legislatures, we're the only industrial, post-industrial country, air quotes around that, however you want to define it, where we have at-will employment. So I wanted to run down kind of how things happen in a few other countries. And the interesting thing here is you are going to hear other capitalist countries in here. They're still doing capitalism, and even the other capitalist countries have better protections than the United States does. So whatever we're doing isn't even normal by capitalism standards, and that says a lot, because, you know, I really dislike capitalism. So starting with, like, Europe in the broader sense of, like, the EU, right? They'll make you give a written employment agreement. If you're an employer, you have to give an employee a written agreement. And there's an EU directive that requires written employment agreements or a statement of terms and conditions of the employment. And they call them statements of employment particulars. So after you give that to an employee, if you want to terminate a worker, you have to provide written notice with a valid reason, like something they are doing that's not okay, and a minimum of 15 days notice. And severance pay has to be 20 days of wages per year of service, up to the equivalent of 12 months. So you get 2 weeks notice and you get severance pay. Then you have China, obviously CCP, Marxist-Leninist, moving out of a state of capitalism into a state of socialism per the Marxist-Leninist plan, kind of how things flow, right? So there we're starting to see a lot more protections for workers happen. And since 2008, I've talked about this before, since 2008, worker protections there have been massive. It's really been growing really, really good. We've talked about this before. Like China has like over a 90% home ownership rate, so they're taking care of workers there. There, an employee is entitled to receive severance if they're fired, but to avoid like costly legal battles, lots of employers will just offer you like more money than they're supposed to get your consent for the employment agreement to end. So basically, if the employee in China is entitled to the payment of severance, the statutory minimum payment is calculated. And the only reason you wouldn't be entitled is if you were in your probationary period. A lot of these countries will have a probationary period, like say 6 months, where they're testing you out. But after that, if someone wants to fire you, it's really, really hard. Okay. So it's like that here. The minimum payment then in China for severance would be calculated as your average monthly wages during the previous 12 months times the year of service for the company.
Wow.
Yeah. So as long as you worked there, that's your severance pay. So if the employee's regular salary is 5 times the local average wages, then his or her monthly wage multiplier will just be 3 times the local average wage rather than the employee's average monthly wage. So like if you're like a big earner, they're like, okay, you're not getting all this money, but it is still pretty good. So severance payments also will result in a lower individual income tax burden too. So if you're fired, you're not paying the same high taxes on your income that you would be if you were working as a job. You get like a tax cut because they're like, yeah, you got fired.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, that's really hard for you. And if the payment is lower than 3 times the local annual average salary, the severance is tax exempt completely.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So that's how they're doing it in China. In the Philippines, an employer has to give an employee 2 written notices and a hearing once grounds for just cause have been given for a termination. So that's what the thing is happening here. It's really hard to fire people. Like in China, how they would like maybe have a dispute, they have to have just cause for firing you, but it's a lot easier if the employee is like, this was a mutual agreement to terminate this agreement or to terminate this arrangement. So that's why the bosses will just be like, yeah, will you just say it was mutual? We'll give you more than the severance you're entitled to.
That's
and
a lot of money.
Take it. And it's a lot of money. So in the Philippines, the same kind of thing. It's really, really hard. You have to have hearings. You have to be like, yes, there's a just cause to fire this person. And once that happens, the employer has to, again, provide severance pay. In Thailand, you have to get permission from a Thai court to fire somebody.
Wow.
Yeah. This one's pretty wild. And it's similar to having like a union in the United States. This would happen only if the employer is part of an employee committee, but it's like a union there. And employees who are not part of an employee committee, they can be fired without just cause. But regardless, the employer has to pay full compensation to the terminated employee. Then in Japan, they just like expect that you are going to be employed for life wherever you work.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what they say. They're like, lifetime employment is the expectation. So the lifetime rule of employment restricts employers from firing employees like it all, except in cases of extreme misconduct.
It's so funny. You know what is in my mind? I'm like, I think you'd have to burn the place down.
You'd have to like burn the place down. You'd have to walk in and punch somebody. Like you would have to be like,
or like steal all the money in the cash register.
Right. These would be examples of how you could get
Not
fired.
even just $5. You gotta steal it all.
You gotta take it all because the expectation is that you hire someone, they're at your company for life or until your company goes out of business.
It's so funny because I think this is where people go on the internet. They're like, well, what if someone burns the place down and then punches an old lady and then...
Yeah, and you're like, that would be grounds for termination.
Anywhere!
Yeah, anywhere.
But I like how, that's where my brain goes. It's like, that's what you'd have to do.
Yeah.
And you'd have to burn it down on purpose.
And to me, the Japan thing really hammered home how little protection we have in the United States. It's like, oh, in other countries, when you hire somebody, you're expected to take care of them for life.
Yeah, it seems that I think that's why my friend had such a long maternity leave.
Right, because it's like you're going to be here for the rest of your life.
And
What's
she
2 years?
works at a small business.
Yeah.
Like not very many, like, under 50 employees.
Right. So, okay, in Mexico's federal labor law does not include poor performance at your job as grounds to terminate an employee. So
That's cool.
I know, just because you're bad at your job, it's just like, yeah, some people are bad at their jobs. That's how life goes. Although there is a 2012 amendment to the law that emphasizes the importance of training your employees. So, like, if your employee's really bad, you need to, like, train them to be better.
Yeah, I'm kind of like, that's on you.
Yeah, but I think that's cool because I've said this before on Twitter. It's like, even people who are bad at their jobs deserve housing and a paycheck. Like, the expectation should not be that every single person you encounter out in the world, especially as a customer entering service situations, whatever, the expectation should not be that this person is the best fucking person at this job. Like, we have to, as a society, make space for people who are kind of bad at their jobs because they still deserve to live. And, like, you are not a petty king who deserves to be waited on hand and foot by the ultimate best servant that money can buy. Like, if you go to Starbucks, that person's making minimum wage and maybe they're just kind of bad at their job. They still have to pay rent. Who fucking cares if they made their drink wrong? They might make your drink wrong. That's how it goes.
I'm just going to say it's hard to get hired at Starbucks because I did not get hired at Starbucks.
Wow.
It is, like, I was talking, my sister worked at Starbucks for many years and she's like, surprisingly, like, it was a good place to work for.
I had a friend who worked there in high school and said it was good. At the time, the minimum wage in California was $7.25 an hour and he made $15 an hour and even as a part-time employee got benefits. But obviously there's been a lot of unionization efforts. Yes. And now when I hear about my friends who work at Starbucks more recently, they're like, no, it's a shit show. So I feel like it's one of those things that's getting worse and worse and worse as an employment situation.
It's funny, though, because the bar is on the floor.
Yeah, the bar is on the floor, yeah.
But it's just like, it's like, it's so funny that there are no unskilled jobs. Like, people are just like, oh, well, anyone can work at McDonald's. It's like...
I could not work at McDonald's. I'm confident in that right now. I would be very bad at that job. I would do it. I'm not above working at McDonald's. That's not what I'm saying. I would just be really bad
They would fire me, too.
I would probably get fired in any food service job. My memory, terrible.
No memory, bad at time. Thank you, ADHD. That is not a good job for me. But, you know, there's other things I can do super, super well.
Yeah. Same. I just do think we really need to normalize people being bad at their jobs and us not getting mad at that.
I also think that if we expect everyone to be employed, which to me is stupid, but, you know, let's just say as a society right now, just the world we live in, we expect everybody to be...
Disability is so hard to get. So it's like I have friends with extreme bipolar disorder who should be on disability because it affects their ability to work. They're not eligible for it. So it's like, okay, if you're saying you want people with extreme bipolar disorder out in the workplace, you gotta be okay with somebody crying into your latte while they're making it.
Yeah, or like, I've even known people who are like, like, even if you are like, you, like, physically can't lift objects, the people at the, Social Security be like, well, you can work can you do telemarketing? Yeah. They'll be like, oh, well, there's jobs, even if you can't lift anything over 2 pounds, like, you have to, and then you're just like, okay, now I have to know the computer. It's just like, people expect you to be employed to a very high... Like, you literally have to be in a vegetative state.
It is extremely difficult to get access to disability.
Yeah, like, because they're just like, oh, well, I can't do anything. They're like, you can be a door greeter.
Yeah.
You can be a... You know, like, people will say any... Like, in our society, as it is now, I will say everybody is expected to be employed.
Yeah, so if we're going to do that as a society even more, you got to be okay with people not being great at their jobs because they might not be choosing the jobs they're best suited for. They might be taking whatever job was available in their area. It's not like everybody is going out choosing the job that they are going to be the most awesome at. It's like people are taking whatever jobs they can get that they need to take to survive, and they might be bad at them. And guess what? They still have to survive. So that's my, like, biggest thing is I'm like, let people be bad at their jobs. Like, 100%. Like, I always think about this with disability. I had a friend who had a really, really rare sleep disorder, which meant that her body could not register when she'd had enough sleep. I'm sure I've talked about her before on the podcast. But yeah, so the only solution, because it was so rare and happened so infrequently and no doctors had studied it really or come up with a good solution for it, the best solution they had was to pump her full of stimulants constantly to keep her awake. So literally, for her to work a job, she had to just be taking multiple Adderalls every few hours to stay awake. And the doctors were like, yeah, one day this will probably make your heart explode, but we don't know the alternative. Because the alternative would literally be that she would sleep for weeks.
Oh my God. Yeah. That's terrifying.
It was terrifying. And, like, she would have to be woken up by people. Like, one time, her family went out of town and she slept through multiple days because nobody was there to wake her up. So this is a person who her condition was so rare, even though it was very, very hard for her to have a job because you want to talk about complete vegetative state, she was asleep. Her default state was asleep, and she had to be on damaging, harmful, constant stimulation. Like, we're talking high levels of Adderall. So high that every few months it was an issue for her trying to get them fulfilled because nobody understood what was happening. Very extreme. Just for her to function and have a job, her condition was so rare that it didn't make the list of approved conditions to qualify for disability. So she just has to work a job forever, even though her body can barely function. And it's like, you look at these things and you're like, okay, well, if you hire her to work a job, she might fall asleep on it because she has no choice not to. But what is the alternative? Like, she needs a job to pay rent, to survive. And so that's kind of the trade-off you get. So, you know, yeah, going back to this Mexico thing, I love that Mexico's like, just because an employee is bad at their job doesn't mean you get to fire them. Some people are just going to be bad at their jobs.
Yeah, to me, it's just like, if you're going to do this thing where we don't have a safety net and literally everybody is expected to work, and now they're probably going to be like, children should work too.
Well, that's what they're already doing, right? They're already trying to make children more employed in like mining and stuff and like the Rust Belt.
I don't want to.
Wild.
It's wild. Like, but it's just like, if you're gonna do that, like, you can't expect quality.
No. Okay, so then also in Canada, to fire somebody, you generally need to be able to prove willful misconduct, disobedience, or willful neglect of duty. And again, in Canada, unsatisfactory performance does not fall within that definition. So a termination would require the payment, though, of a statutory notice, common law notice, and severance in certain situations if somebody did display willful misconduct, disobedience, or willful neglect of duty. So again, Canada, you can't just be bad at your job and they fire you. You've got all these protections. And then in the UK, employees are hired by way of an indefinite employment, meaning they can't get fired unless there's a really good reason to do so again. So Aaron Meyer, who's a professor at Global Business School, who studied how cultural differences impact businesses, says, in the UK, it is not like the US, where you fire somebody, you pack up their boxes and march them out the door. No, like, that's not how it's happening in basically every other country on the planet. And it is so wild to think that we have associated this at-will employment thing with being so normal, we don't even realize how evil it is. We literally have no protections from our employers. Our livelihood depends on them completely. And most of the world, like everybody else, is getting this protection that we don't. But I feel like if you brought that up in the United States and you were like, hey, maybe this is messed up and like maybe you shouldn't just be able to fire an employee even if they're bad at their job, people would be like, oh, what? That can't be real. But it actually is real, and it's very common other places. So after, thinking about all this, the question I had is like, all right, how did the United States end up here, right? Like, what's different about us? Why do we not have this thing everybody else has? Most of these other countries do have these laws about how and when you can fire somebody. They're called severance mandates. And there are 3 major occurrences historically that resulted in other countries having these severance mandates throughout the world. And the first is the creation of labor codes. The second is high levels of unemployment. And the third is the expansion of the welfare state after World War II. Like, in 1802, Sir Robert Peel introduced the English Factory Act, which didn't pass until 1833, but it placed restrictions on the maximum number of working hours that apprentices could have. And that was supposed to be to improve working conditions for children. So this would be an example of, like, certain labor codes coming about. And by 1875, both the United States and the United Kingdom were recognizing employees as equal to the employer. And that meant that each party was then free to accept or reject offers, free to terminate contracts, and expected to pay damages if the termination amounted to a breach of contract. So where did things start to differ between, for example, England and the United States? Well, according to most legal scholars, this doctrine of at-will employment first appeared in 1877 as a statement in a legal, I can never pronounce this word, treatise?
Yeah.
Treatise. Okay, I am pronouncing it. By Horace C. Wood, which was called Master and Servant. So the original statement by Wood, and also early courts that would follow Wood's kind of statement to the letter, they contain no reason for this rule. But it seemed plausible to people, and literally just nobody checked it. So this is what Horace Wood said. He said, the employee has to be free to quit at any time, right? Otherwise, there's the possibility of involuntary servitude, which is prohibited in the 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, right? You can't have slavery. The employee has to be free to quit. But the doctrine of mutuality of obligations then therefore must require a symmetrical right of the employer to be able to terminate an employee at any time. So this is the statement he made, and all of these courts were like, yeah, that sounds about right. But the doctrine of mutuality of obligations, like, that long since has been repudiated. Modern contract law allows any promise that's supported by consideration, but the legal doctrine of at-will employment, for some reason, just, like, continues, even though it's, like, anachronistic to, like, what everybody has decided is true about this kind of idea of mutuality of obligations. So in this kind of statement, Wood cited 4 American cases, supposedly proving that at-will employment was the rational thing, and it's already been upheld by the courts, and this is just how it goes. But none of these 4 cases actually supported Wood's statement at all. And just kind of nobody looked into it. So basically, Wood simply invented the concept of at-will employment, wrongfully described it as already accepted by the courts, and soon after his treatise appeared, courts began citing the rule in his treatise because it referenced court cases that were not accurate. They, like, didn't reference the original cases. They just referenced him referencing the cases. And after the first time that happened, it became law because it became precedent.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, so this is so wild, actually, that we have at-will employment. It doesn't make any fucking sense, and it's just proof of how fucking weird our country is. So basically, because one judge didn't check to see if this guy's sources of his 4 cases was actually real, he was just like, yeah, well, like Wood said, those 4 cases prove it. They didn't. Then all of a sudden, it became a law, because everyone moving forward was able to reference that one judge's case, which actually did, you know, support the Wood thing. So it's like this weird circular logic that doesn't make sense. And, like, if it's confusing, that's because that's how laws in the United States work. They don't fucking make sense. So a lot of people have since been like, that was pretty bullshit, right? So in 1983, the Wisconsin Supreme Court explained this development of at-will employment by saying, in the late 19th century, apparently influenced by the laissez-faire climate of the Industrial Revolution, the American courts rejected English rule and developed their own common law rule, the employment at-will doctrine. The doctrine recognized that where an employment was for an indefinite term, an employer may discharge an employee for good cause, for no cause, or even for cause morally wrong, without thereby being guilty of legal wrong. So they're like, yeah, this is how this happened. You could ethically be totally wrong for firing somebody. You could fire them because you think that they're ugly, but you would not be legally wrong to do so. And a lot of people are like, the reason why everyone was so anxious to take this on is because everyone was really anti-England. And England was introducing more labor protections. Like, no, there's a contract. You can't just fire for someone for any time. And a lot of Americans were like, we're not like that. We're different. So we're going to have a different rule. And that's why everybody liked this Wood thing that he came up with, because it was also anti-English. It was pro-business and it was anti-English, right? So today, Ludmila Praslava, who's a professor of psychology at Vanguard University of Southern California, says at-will employment is probably here to stay in the United States because we have a very strong influence that businesses historically have on, like, politics and legislation here, like going back in history, and it gives businesses a huge amount of freedom. So they are lobbying successfully, right, to keep it. There's no reason for businesses not to want at-will employment, and people who run businesses are rich and successful and control our government, so why would they get rid of it? It doesn't benefit them. And Naja Farley, who's a senior staff attorney at the National Employment Law Project, says, I believe that a lot of the reason why we have such an emphasis on at-will employment here is because of the history of racial discrimination and slavery. And she's explaining that there's a centuries-long tradition of devaluing labor and laborers that impacts employer attitudes even today. So this all happens, and, you know, into the 70s and the 80s, people are really like, God, that is honestly how we got stuck with this law? Like, that doesn't even make sense. So we've seen a lot of attorneys and courts start to challenge this and push back and be like, this doesn't even make sense. But it doesn't matter because it's a federal law. So you have these individual state courts and individual attorneys being like, what? But it doesn't go anywhere and it's not going to change anything. So in 1985, for example, attorney William L. Mock wrote, the doctrine of employment at will emerged in the 19th century in the United States in a climate of unbridled, laissez-faire expansionism. Remember, that's what last people said too. Social Darwinism and rugged individualism. It's often referred to as Wood's Rule, named after Horace C. Wood, who articulated the doctrine in an 1877 treatise, Master and Servant. No doubt the title of the treatise says all that needs to be said regarding Wood's view of employment relations and, unfortunately, the view shared by most of his legal contemporaries. So I feel like that's like a law roast. I feel like if you're a lawyer, that's just like, oh, burn, you know? That same year, a court in Missouri reviewed wrongful discharge cases that were reported between 1977 and 1984 and concluded, as many of the decided cases illustrate, the burden of the at-will employment doctrine seems to be falling most heavily and harshly upon professional and upper and middle level employees. They have the least protection. Most are at-will employees and few have job security through unions or individually negotiated contracts. They have the most to lose, frequently being the long-term employees who've had the greatest responsibility and substantial investment in and the highest expectation from their careers. Often they're in an age when replacement of their life and medical insurance programs and their retirement plans are difficult or impossible. They're the most vulnerable to the improper demands of employers who find it profitable to take chances with antitrust and consumer fraud violations, environmental pollution, health-related misconduct, defense procurement fraud, and the like. The at-will employment doctrine does not include, contemplate, or require a privilege in the employer to subject its employees to the risks of civil and criminal liability that participation in such activities entails. And I think this is a really interesting thing they've observed, because they're basically like, you know who gets fired the most? It's people who are getting a little bit older and further along in their careers. Probably because they're making more money and it's cheaper for the company to fire them, leave them hanging, and hire someone young and new to take their place to do the job for like half the price. And then what that means is you can go your whole career being good worker, and you say you hit around 50, you're approaching retirement, your medical costs are more significant as you get older, your health insurance means more to you, and all of a sudden your boss fires you because they want to hire an intern to do your job for half the price. Mm-hmm. Now you don't have access to health insurance. Your medical costs are mounting. You have maybe a mortgage payment because you're supposed to be a little more financially stable. Maybe you bought a house. Maybe you have more expenses. And you are just kind of shit out of luck. And nobody wants to hire a 50-year-old, right? Because you're aging out. You're more expensive to have and you're getting older. It's this huge problem. So then in 1989, the Utah Supreme Court took Wood to task. They said the genesis of the at-will rule in its present form in America can be traced to Horace G. Wood's 1877 treatise on the master-servant relationship. Wood proffered his rule without analysis and cited apparently inapposite authority on its behalf. Notwithstanding its dubious antecedents, the rule was adopted by many jurisdictions without careful or thorough examination. Most courts offered no rationale or analysis for substituting the at-will doctrine for the common law presumption. By the arrival of the 20th century, the at-will doctrine was well established throughout the United States and served to reinforce turn-of-the-century ideas concerning laissez-faire economics and freedom to contract. So Utah was straight up like, yeah, nobody checked to see if this was real. He just decided it was real and everyone decided to trust him, and now we're stuck with this.
Yeah.
It's pretty scary and wild. And there's so many dire consequences for this, which we touched on earlier. So the real things that are scary here is just how much getting fired can mess up your life.
Yeah.
So over 40% of U.S. workers will be fired or let go by employers at some point. And out of those, 69 who have been fired, 69% report that they were terminated for no reason at all. So this is that at-will thing. And 72% said that they were fired without warning or without a chance to improve whatever might have been wrong in the workplace. And adding insult to injury, only 34% of terminated workers in the U.S. receive any sort of severance pay, and usually it's far below what other countries would have. So this is a problem because 41% of U.S. workers only have enough savings to cover up to a month of expenses if they lost their jobs today. And this number is higher if you happen to be Black, for example. 53% of Black workers only have enough to cover up to 1 month, compared to only 39% of white workers, meaning 39% of white workers have more in savings than that. So this means that already vulnerable communities are at a greater risk of being out of luck if they were to lose their jobs suddenly. This also means that workers who are fearful of losing their jobs are often reluctant to speak out about any workplace concerns. So maybe you're less likely to bring up health and safety hazards, harassment you're experiencing, discrimination, wage theft, because you're afraid of getting fired. More than 1 in 3 workers, 35%, worked under hazardous and unhealthy conditions to avoid being fired. More than 1 in 3, 33%, accept less than what's owed to them to avoid being fired. That's wage theft. Almost half, 44% of workers, endure verbal abuse or hostility from a manager or supervisor to avoid being disciplined or fired. More than half, 57%, work unwanted overtime, and 59% skipped breaks to avoid being fired. Almost 2 in 3, 66%, worked while sick to avoid being fired. Almost half, 47%, postponed medical care to avoid being fired. And almost half, 45%, neglected important family responsibilities or events to avoid being fired. And it is hard to tell these fearful workers that they're in the wrong for not speaking up, especially when we know the consequences in one's life for losing your job, massive. One review of data regarding employment poverty found that 4 primary themes concerning the relationship between work and like income inequality and poverty exist. So the first is that unemployment has obviously devastating financial and psychological consequences for people. The second is that a reemployment is challenging to acquire, but crucial if you're trying to recover from all the bad stuff that comes along with unemployment. The third is that systemic and societal factors like employment bias and gaps in employment law will shape and constrain employment processes for people. And the fourth is that the nature of employment is changing, right, because of technological advances and growth and globalization, new business relationships. And that introduces even more problems for people who are underemployed, unemployed, or trying to enter reemployment. So experts say that unemployment is also the second leading cause of homelessness in the United States. The LA Times reported that an increase of the unemployment rate to 5.25% could cause an estimated 62,000 more people in the United States to lose their home.
Yeah.
So researchers have also estimated unemployment rates among people experiencing homelessness will range from 57% up to over 90%, compared to just 3.6% for the general United States population. And once homeless, we know it's becoming even harder for you to get a job. So these issues are interacting with each other and exacerbating each other. So basically, at-will employment in the United States is a public health concern. We know that because losing your job increases your chance of losing your health insurance, which is tied to your job, and your home. And once you're unhoused, you are more likely to die young, a full 17.5 years sooner than the general population. So this is something that is quite literally killing people. Obviously, not every person who loses their job will then lose their health insurance, become homeless, and die 17.5 years sooner. But we can calculate definitively that, for example, an increase of around 2% of the unemployment rate leads to 62,000 Americans losing their homes. We know these things are directly correlated. And even if it doesn't affect everybody, it affects tens of thousands of people. And we know that once homeless, you are more likely to die sooner. So there's like this through line to this at-will employment having a lack of job security and literally dying. Like, this is killing people. And there's other consequences too, like your mental health. Like when I got laid off, I was the lowest I had ever been in my life. Like I'm not a person who like thought I prided myself in labor, right? But I always felt like I was a good worker, and getting laid off was a real blow to me psychologically. And I read this piece by Kayleen Schaefer, who talked about losing her job as a senior editor at the age of 33. She was like, yeah, one Wednesday, right after lunch, during what felt like an ordinary day, my boss called and said, can you come up to the conference room? And when I got there was a woman I'd never seen before who said she was from HR. She asked me to sit down, and before my butt was even fully in the chair, she said, your position is being eliminated. And everything I'd worked so hard for was taken away in this conference room in less than 5 minutes. And she said, in the weeks and months after my job was eliminated, I couldn't find another job. I started working on my own as a freelance writer, which meant I no longer had a job that seemed like an actual job. And we've done episodes about freelancing before. When you're a freelancer, there are no protections. You have no benefits. You have no paid time off. Like, no. Even regular workers at American jobs, like, often don't get any paid time off, but sometimes you can get like vacation time or health insurance, right? Not legally mandated, but sometimes. Freelance workers get none of that. You also have a higher tax burden because you have to pay the 15% self-employment tax that your employer would usually pay.
That's bullshit. And under Trump, it went up.
It's so wild. And then on top of having to pay more taxes, you have less like protections for safety in the workplace because you're an independent contractor, which means that technically you're your own little business and you only have yourself accountable for workplace safety and protections.
Yeah, I think about that all the time when I was working the flea markets.
Yeah,
like, I know
really
someone who like there was a really like fucked up thing happened at the flea market. Flea market was not responsible for their injuries.
Right, because you're an independent contractor.
Exactly.
You're your own business. Your business is responsible for your injuries because you technically work for that little business. That's you.
Even though it was a safety violation of the flea market.
Right. So she goes on and says, when I tell people I was freelancing, their reaction, either implicitly or explicitly, was that I was just waiting until someone offered me a real job. Which, yeah, every time I've been freelancing, that's what I've been doing. She said, my boyfriend and I broke up. He wanted me to move to his city because he's the one who still had a corporate job, but I didn't want to because that would seem like admitting failure, and that would be like a retreat that I was forced into because I couldn't make my own career happen. So then I started to spend a lot of time by myself. And in the beginning, I was working more than ever because I was so panicked about money, but also I was grasping for something work-related that would make me feel centered and capable, like as capable as I had been before I was fired. And she's just describing all of this. And I'm like, Yeah, this is like the thing. You're so scared when you lose your job, you just jump into anything. And even when I lost my job, the new job I had on Monday, it was part-time freelance work. It was not full-time work. It was not a real job. I didn't have any of the same benefits. My income was cut in half, and I was so grateful to just have something, you know? So this is just the thing that happens. Losing your job is incredibly stressful, and it's gonna take a heavy toll on your mental health in addition to your finances. It is literally a traumatic event. And the Department of Labor in the United States even says being laid off from your job is one of the most traumatic events you can experience in life.
Yeah, it's funny, even though like technically I've never been laid off or fired, in my last like business, it was basically like kind of like when you leave in the business.
Right.
Like, you know, I technically left out of my own accord, but it was either that or it was going to be like a hostile takeover type of situation. So I was kind of like, you know what's funny? When I left that business, they were trying to make me sign a non-compete clause that I would not work for any other vintage store for 2 years. That is so wild.
Non-compete clauses we should do a whole episode on those too, because it's so gnarly, because you're basically saying I won't work in my industry I am trained to work in.
Exactly. I wish I could say the name of this fucking store so no one would ever go there, but I don't want to deal with again, legal shit.
Yeah.
Like, you know, but I think about that. I was like, yeah, I technically wasn't fired. Like, I left of my own accord, and like, I got a payout because of the money that I put in the business, but it was still really traumatic. Like, I went from owning a store, you know, you get a little bit of, it's so funny because people always think like, you own a store, like you own your own business. It must be so, you get like, people think that you get like cool points.
Like social capital.
Yeah, it fucking sucks. Yeah. I'm sorry. It fucking sucked. And I actually made more money at the flea market, selling online, selling on eBay, selling on Depop. I made more money at that.
Well, that's how I felt when I had my first business, which was a cooperative business with 3 owners. We all were equal owners. We all worked in the business. It was a physical storefront. And I started running into issues with one of the other owners. So I was like, I'm just going to run an online store for us. That could be a cool extra source of revenue to kind of like remove myself from the situation. And I found that the online store, the sales were just as good as the physical store and a lot less stressful. So that's how I got into online sales. And that's why when I started my own business, I was like, it's online only, because owning a physical retail location, there's a lot of liability that comes into it. There's a lot of city regulations you have to keep up with. It is very, very challenging to do, especially if you're just like a person on your own without financial backing.
You work 7 days a week if you own a store.
Well, because somebody has to be in it all the time. Has to be in. You got to be in it constantly.
But it's just like, but yeah, so going from owning my own store to just like working the flea markets, doing stuff, people made it seem like such a social blow when actually it was a better financial decision for me, that it made me feel really down on myself.
Yeah, it's a psychologically very stressful thing.
Because I was just like, this is actually better for me this is better for me, yet everyone is acting like I just gave up like a career opportunity of a lifetime.
But that's like the thing about the culture of the United States. And so basically, this study from George Washington University found that if you lose your job, right, 42% of people who just lost a job scored above the cutoff on this study for potential depression and mood tests. And Harvard Business Review explained this, and they said getting laid off can feel devastatingly personal and hard on your mental health, along with multiple hits from loss of income, status, daily structure, social support, self-esteem, and identity. There's also the inherent uncertainty that often comes with mapping out your next career move. So they talk about that. They're like, in American culture, right, because capitalism is like, you're the best, work so hard, ooh, you're going to do it, the best thing you can do is be an entrepreneur, a business owner, that's so glorious, like you're exalted to the status. If you kind of lose any sort of job that has status attached to it, you do lose social support and your self-esteem and identity crumbles, because society has been telling you for so long that you're so special for having been in that position.
Yeah, like people would see me at the store and treat me one way, and they'd see me at the flea market and not treat me as nice.
Yeah, and I also, like, my partner who died, who owned a business, committed suicide when the business started to not do well, and it's because he very much attached his identity to owning the business. And I remember at this one point, I was talking to him very frankly, and I was like, this is just your job at the end of the day. Owning this business is just your job, and I would love you no matter what job you had. Like, you could work at Burger King and I would still love you. And he was not like a capitalist person. He was not a person who bought into capitalist propaganda, but he looked at me very seriously and said, I don't know if I could love myself if I worked at Burger King. And I was like, that's irrational, right? Does that mean you look down on people who work at Burger King? And he's like, absolutely not. And I was like, so why do you treat yourself that way? Why would you not love yourself if you worked at Burger King? Because point blank, like, I am financially unstable. There's a very good chance I will have to work at Burger King one day. Will you not love me or respect me if I work at Burger King? And he's like, no, absolutely not. But he just had this like thing in his own head he couldn't get past because there was some sort of status or identity that came with being the person who owned lip service. And that was so heartbreaking for me. And I kept telling him, you are not your job. That is your job. You are a person who is valuable beyond your job. But it's hard to say that because our society, everybody around you, everything in capitalism is telling you that that's not true.
That's why I think that what has saved me the most is I've always been, since a child, I've always been weird. I've always been countercultural. I've always been like, you know what? I'm not like anyone else. Like, fuck you. Not, not like, but I've just always been like, I'm a punk. Like, I'm a weirdo. Like, I want to be, like, I'm not like everybody else. I think that's special. And honestly, it's been hard. Like, people I know, like, it's been ingrained with me since I was a kid. That's the way I've dealt with shit, because I've always been a little bit kooky. Yeah. And some people, it's like, that's I think, and having friends who are a little more countercultural, like, not like, it's fine to be, like, more, I would say normie, but, who's to say what normal is? Like, yeah. But, like, but, it's still funny. Even all my friends who were, like, super countercultural, when I left owning that business, only you and my one other friend was like, why don't you just work at a coffee shop? Yeah. And she was like, oh, you know what you should do? You should get into medical billing. And I was like, to me, I'm just like, but it's so unfat, because I've been obsessed with clothes for forever. I've always worked in clothing. Like, most of my jobs have been, like, clothing. And I was just like, it was like so refreshing to have someone who was cool just be like, you should get into medical billing. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the thing about Drew, my partner who died, is that he grew up a punk in the 70s and 80s. He got into punk when he was very, very, very young in the emerging scene. All his friends were countercultural. But the thing he told me once is that he viewed himself as a fuck up because he was so untraditional, because he had OCD, he had ADHD, he could never pay attention in school, he was a high school dropout. And he's like, owning the business wasn't about money. He had employees who earned more money than him, right? He had a middle-class house, whatever. He drove a Ford pickup truck. But to him, he's like, owning the business is the only way people take me seriously and know I'm not a fuck-up. Because, look, I own this business, so I can't be a complete waste. I can't be complete garbage. I have to be okay at something. And it really was a part of his identity. And, when the business started having these problems, he was trying to sell the business through, like, a bankruptcy sell. And it was like losing his job in a lot of ways. He was selling his business to somebody else to avoid bankruptcy so he could save the jobs of the employees there. That was his whole thing. He's like, I'll walk away because I can sell this business through a bankruptcy process to somebody else, and everybody who works there will be able to keep their jobs. And it was like a mea culpa. Like, he fell on the sword to be like, you guys, I fucked up. I was supposed to steer the ship, and I steered it into an iceberg. You guys take the lifeboats, and I'm gonna throw myself overboard or whatever. And, this kind of goes along with what we know in studies. It's true. Studies show losing your job can increase your risk of suicide. And for him, it did. It was directly correlated. People feel that they failed as a person, or in his sense, that they failed their community. That's what he thought. And it's a grieving process, losing your job. And it's really, really hard on people. And it does lead to an increased risk of suicide. And suicide is the second most common cause of death among adults aged 24 to 35 years old. And research shows that moderate to long-term unemployment spells are a significant risk factor for suicide. So out of all of the suicide deaths worldwide, the researchers estimate that 1 in 5 are tied to unemployment.
I mean, I would believe that. Even like, me not having that, even though technically I wasn't fired, like, that was one of the lowest, like, me leaving that, like, in the process of leaving that job, and it took like a couple months to get all the shit going, but it was just like, I was like, I wasn't eating, I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't like, people were like, whoa, like, what's going on? Yeah. And I'm so glad I had friends who were just like, even it just took 2 to be like, fuck it, man, who cares? Yeah. Thank God. Now I'm kind of just like, fuck it. Like, I would work any job that was chill.
I would work any job that was chill too. But yeah, what this means is that there's an estimated 45,000 suicides every single year that are simply because someone was fired or let go from a job. And when I think about all this stuff, this is why I'm always so shocked that people aren't more angry about the United States, about all of our labor codes, but especially about at-will employment. It's not something you hear people talk about very much. And it literally kills, like I said, tens of thousands of people every single year. And I think a lot of us just didn't even realize that this wasn't standard. So I don't know. In honor of Labor Day, I think it's important to remember that labor unions protect workers from this type of mistreatment, from being viewed as disposable, that Labor Day exists because of the work of Labor Day before us, that protecting workers is one of the most important things we can do, I think, as a society. And the labor rights of the United States are just horrifically subpar compared to pretty much everywhere else in the world. And we need to stop pretending like this is normal. This is not normal. What's actually normal, it turns out, is that your employer provides you with an employment contract and does everything in their power to not fire you, like job trainings and conversations when things are going wrong and time off when you need it. And also just acknowledging that what we call underperformance is sometimes just a part of being human, and you cannot lose your job simply for not being productive enough or good enough at it. Because the workplace has an obligation to protect you as a worker and take care of you. It's like that Crass song, and this is what I end my book with. Spoiler alert, but do they owe us a living?
Of course they do.
Of course they fucking do. And, this is what's normal. And we really need to shift our expectations and, learn to speak up for what we deserve and what we're entitled to. And Fork, my lovely, lovely chaos dachshund, is now whining, so that must mean it's the end of the episode.
Yeah.
But in honor of Labor Day, Kenna, do you have anything else you want to add?
Do they owe us a living? Of course they do. Of course they do.
Thanks so much for listening to another episode of Pick Me Up, I'm Scared. If you would like to join us on Patreon, you can find us there at patreon.com/pickmeupimscared. For $3 a month, you can access bonus content there. But if $3 a month is too much for you to spend right now, we totally get it, and we're just happy you're here. As always, you can find the sources for this week's episode just by scrolling down a bit in the description.